And just here in a second, as soon as my red light comes on. All right, so there it is. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So glad that you're here. Most likely we'll have friends joining us as we go in. Valerie White's helping me out and admitting folks that come in if they need to, if they're coming in. We have some people who've been here before, and we have new folks here too, so we love that. Welcome. Mr. Davis is here. Barry is here. We also have Matt Getting and Stone who are here. He's our, Matt came in, if you haven't had a chance to meet him, in January as our associate head for advancement.
You got it.
Stone is his sidekick. And then we also have Ply Payne, who's our featured guest here today. She's a licensed clinical social worker and a master's, I'm going to mess up the name of this, master's in science and social work. And she's also working towards her next degree, which is exciting, another lifelong learner. So she will have the majority of the time here today. Welcome to, we have some teachers who are here. They come because they want to be here, not because we make them be here. So they're here to support you. They're also here for their own edification and learning. So we're all going through some similar things in this learning environment, and then there's some specific things. So did Lisa Bloomfield, Lisa, do you want to do an introduction, or would you like me to do that, or do you want to just let Pillai get started?
Yeah, I think Pillai can get started. I think you've introduced her, and I think that's great. And I think she'll just jump right in on the discussion of social emotional challenges that our middle school students are facing right now.
Great. All right. So without further ado, it's Pillai Payne.
So thank you so much for having me this morning. I do want to encourage people, if they have questions, to just kind of write them. And then throughout, I can kind of answer those questions. So if you have anything right now, please feel free to write those questions. The focus of today's talk really is going to be on kind of anxiety that could be caused by, COVID-19. So when anxiety can be caused by a lot of different things, but I want to talk about two things in particular for our children. So we're looking at, one, the switch, doing school very differently, what that looks like. And the other thing that can cause anxiety that's very prevalent is the COVID-19 virus itself. I'm actually going to start with the COVID-19 virus itself. At this time, we want to make sure that kids feel safe, they feel seen, and they feel heard, right? So we want to be very careful that we're not dismissing their feelings, that we're listening to what they're saying. At this age, it's a little bit different than some of the younger kids. The younger kids, we want them to be able to tell their story. It doesn't quite matter if it makes sense. At this age, we want them to be able to tell their story, we want to validate their feelings, and then we want to give them appropriate coping skills to kind of move forward. So what do appropriate coping skills look like for this age? That can be anything from healthy breathing exercises, which I will share with everyone, reframing their thoughts. So if they're having very negative, or we call catastrophizing thoughts, so they're making something very huge, right? We want to help them bring that down to something that's more close to reality. Now, this is a little bit difficult because I had a parent the other day at my private practice call me, and they said, my kid is washing their hands 10 times a day. And, I said, well, actually, that's with CDC regulations. So where maybe before that would have been an abnormal behavior, it's actually something that is very normal. I'll talk a little bit later about creating structure, but as far as like hand washing and things of that nature, we just want to start making that a part of the routine, given the virus and what's going on. We don't want to make it something bigger than it is, right? Because we want to watch that we are coping, and kids are going to watch how we cope, and that's how they are going to cope. So we're kind of the biggest person, right? They're looking at how we're handling things. So it's an interesting balance. But this balance is being able to share with your child that you might have some anxiety yourself, and showing them that you're coping effectively. Does anyone have any questions about that? The other thing that I think is huge is it is fine at this age to have your child watch the news, but I think for all of us, we want to limit what that looks like. 24/7 watching the news will produce more anxiety than is probably needed. So being able to have like a good conversation, maybe going to a government website and looking at the facts and looking at what's happening for a limited period of time, perfectly fine. Sitting in front of the news, hour on end, it's not going to be a very healthy or it is going to be a very anxiety provoking thing. So we really want to watch what the news intake looks like. When you do hear about the virus, clearly they're talking about sometimes at this point, we know that it can affect everyone, but it does talk about older populations. And so I've seen that a lot of kids are also having a lot of anxiety around, are my grandparents going to be okay? And this is something else that's really important. Children are also noticing oh, I can't see my grandparents as much, or, oh, we can't go over there because we are social distancing. So it's very important that we're still trying to FaceTime or have phone calls or do things so that we can still maintain these relationships. I saw a doctor say, we're definitely, distancing ourselves, but there still should be social warmth. So we're not distancing ourselves as far as that we're not communicating with others and we're not maintaining those relationships. And we have to, when we go into kind of the feelings of sadness, this can be really sad, right? There is a loss of connection. If you're very close to your grandmother, it doesn't feel good to not be able to see her, to hug her, right? And kind of validating those feelings and then figuring out effective ways to cope. Okay? Does anyone have any questions as far as that? The other thing I do want to just point out as well, when we're looking at anxiety, right, especially with germs, and I don't want to pathologize too much, we want to make sure kids aren't doing rituals, all right? And if you have more questions about that, I'll talk about how you can get in contact with me later. But that's just something as everyone should be looking for your child to make sure that they're using healthy coping skills, but there's no type of ritual that's happening. So when I say ritual, that means they're tapping 3 times, or they're walking in a certain way, or even maybe mental rituals, but that's a little bit more complicated because these are the times where you can have anxiety and it can create something else. And we just want to be very mindful of those things and kind of get rid of them ahead of time. Okay. The next part of the anxiety and also the sadness is just that school looks very different. I would hope that, school is a fun place for your child, some place that they enjoy and also provides them with a lot of structure. I really think about the 8th graders as well, who have a lot of, it's our last year here, it's our last year at St. Anne's, and there's things that they're going to miss out on that they've probably been waiting for, for a long time, right, to be an 8th grader. So again, it's back to safe, seen, heard. So telling them that they're safe, hearing what they're saying, validating their feelings, and then just kind of creating a plan. I think as parents, the best thing you have is a visual schedule. So trying to recreate some of the structure that they already had at school. We want to create a visual structure for them. So this can look a lot of different ways. For the middle schoolers, because they are older, incentives still work, and I think they're wonderful things. And I think behavioral therapists would say incentives are great, and a lot of these incentives you would do anyway. So if it is, and clearly we're limited, right? But if it is, once you finish this, you can go outside, or once we finish this, we can have ice cream, right? Or you did such a great job on that project. Now we're gonna, make your favorite dinner, right? And these might be things you were gonna do anyway, but you can tie them to positive behaviors and positive coping. It's unfortunate that this is happening, but it does give us a great ability to kind of teach children, right, how to deal with situations that don't feel great. So that's kind of what we call emotional regulation. So children, any of us, right, when we have to deal with something different, we have to have a certain level of cognitive flexibility. and children are learning how to develop this. And there's nothing like having to be online to do your schoolwork in a very different manner that can kind of build these neural pathways, right? So when they're able to do this, and when they're able to cope, and when they're able to finish their work, and when they're able to complete their visual schedule, it is so important to reinforce that, to tell them, great job, being problem focused and not emotionally focused. Though there are some good emotionally focused things, but I won't get into that. But for the most part, we do want them to be problem focused, finding a solution to kind of help them. Did I get any questions? I see.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay, just people talking. Okay. So it's really important to kind of use those incentives. If you are struggling with creating structure in the household or having a problem with that, the school is going to make me available to do short, like maybe one-time sessions to kind of figure out effective ways to kind of get a structure, because it might look different. Especially, I know some parents are leaving the house. Some parents are, home all day. So it makes it different what that looks like. But we want to, as much as possible, reduce the acting out behaviors, because it's very common. I know people say they're attention seeking, and they are attention seeking, but they're attention seeking because the child needs something. It doesn't mean that you're not providing it as a parent, but sometimes it's just helpful to kind of figure out what the situation looks like and how we can give that child what they need in a healthy way. And I think too, one of the bigger struggles, especially if you have more than one child, is one child might act a certain way and another child acts another way. And you're like, well, this child's doing fine on this schedule and this child's doing fine. But we really have to critique the behavioral plan or the behavioral intervention for each child. So it looks different, but the main goal is that the work is completed and that they're regulating themselves appropriately. Okay. I think that is the basis of what I wanted to talk about. I don't know if anyone has any questions or something that they wanted to talk about. Oh, I think I just got one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we have, let's see, dealing with, okay. Mr. Barry Davis said, I recently heard that someone mentioned the term anticipatory grief. Can you speak about this?
Yes. So I think in general, people are really experiencing grief and didn't even really know about it. So I'll get to the second part of the question, but we are, as a society, we're losing a lot, right? So we're also seeing other things that in the future we could potentially lose, right? This goes back to, it's called like ACT in therapy, but kind of acceptance, commitment. So accepting kind of what it is, right? And it's very helpful, especially for children and adults, to kind of see what it is and talk about what it is, accept it, and then commit to a plan to move forward. Dwelling in what could or could not happen, unless it's like planning, is not always helpful. And it is something that can cause a lot of anxiety that leads to depression, or depression that leads to anxiety or sadness. So we want to make sure that we're being realistic, right? And clearly things are going to happen that are not going to be great. And having those conversations with your children, especially at this age, in an age-appropriate manner is very important. But dealing with what you can deal with, accepting what is, and moving on and figuring out how to kind of deal with that is very important and is a life skill. It really is a life skill. So it's not good that this is happening, but it's good that we can build those life skills with our children. Does that answer your question?
Okay. All right. We have a question from Victoria Fuentes Cox. She says, my son is starting to become very dependent. He was very independent prior to this.
Yes. Yes. So this is actually very normal. And one thing that we're seeing a lot, and you see, and I don't want to use the word trauma, but in a way, this is an event that's very different, right? And so sometimes children do kind of revert back to old behaviors because they just want to feel safe. They want to feel safe. Provide, and I was even like reading some articles talking about how like these teenagers are coming into their parents' room and like cuddling with their parents, and their parents are like, they haven't hugged me in years, you know what I mean? And they just want to sit there and cuddle with their parents. So this is very normal. I think it's important to kind of share with him what you're seeing. So, you know, how are you feeling? I noticed that like you're leaning on me a lot more. Is there something that you need from me? Is there something that you're feeling? I like to go with the feeling first if they can identify it. And sometimes I'll get like a feeling wheel and have them just circle all the feelings that they're feeling. And so kind of being able to process that will give him some self-awareness, hopefully, of what's going on so that he can try to, you know, be a little bit more independent. With that said, it's very normal that he's experiencing this. And there are some good things in the fact that he feels like he can lean on you. So it's, you know, it's a balance. We don't want him to totally revert, but we also want him to know that this is a safe space. I'm glad that you feel like I'm a safe person. So let's figure out what's going on to get you kind of where you were, but also know that you can always lean on me and I'm here for you. And I hear you and I understand that this is a very strange and different situation.
Okay, thank you. The Randolph family asks, can you say more about rituals? Big picture, like what do you mean and why is this a concern, and any examples?
Yes, so I don't want to scare anyone, right? But with anxiety, OCD can develop, and OCD especially can develop with viruses and germs, right? And what happens is your brain all our brains do this. We start to have very bizarre thoughts. Like just kind of very wild and bizarre thoughts. And we think, okay, if I don't step on this crack, my mom is going to get coronavirus, right? And so you see that they'll step on the crack 3 times, right? And there's no correlation. There's nothing there, right? But it's kind of I would say like a maladaptive way people cope. And religion is a wonderful thing, but it tends to happen more with religious people because we do have rituals in our services. So there is a higher, you know, increase for people who are religious. So it's just important for us to be very aware of it, because if there was something where we see, oh, there might be some OCD here, totally fine, totally something we can fix, but we want to make sure. Another big one that I see a lot too is that sometimes kids start to have like rituals at night. So it's, I have to speak to this parent first, I have to speak to this parent second, I have to have this, and then I can go to bed. And again, it might not be a ritual, it might just be a routine, but we need to know the difference. And typically you find the difference in, you know, if I don't do that, I feel uncomfortable, versus if I don't do that, I'm crying and I'm upset and the world's going to end because I have this really weird thought attached to it, which is a cognitive distortion.
Okay, thank you. The Ramirez family asks, in what ways can I strengthen the executive function of my child when he has to work online, which can be distracting, and he's getting a lot of different instructions in many different ways, and that can be confusing?
Love that question. I love executive functioning. So the important thing to recognize is that the brain doesn't fully develop till 25. So we are teaching them. Okay. So at this age, some kids don't have any structure, don't have any issues with it. And some kids are going to struggle a little bit, right? The best thing to kind of do is, 1, to help make them aware. And 2, well, there's a couple things. 2, we want to get him to be able to do the work for a certain amount of time and give him breaks so that he's doing it in an effective way. The other thing that I find really helpful is playing games with your kid. That will build executive functioning. And I can actually, Jill, send you a link, because Harvard sent all these games that like we all have in our closet that are actually proven to like build executive functioning, thinking skills, going from here, here, and here. I'm thinking what you're really getting to is the impulse control. And what we want to do there is just keep building it. So if he has to work for like 30 minutes, and then we give him a 5-minute break, and then we try to get him to 35 minutes, 5-minute break, 40 minutes, 5-minute break. We just want to build that frustration tolerance to try to take away that kind of impulsive, like I can't do this anymore. I also, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I read a really interesting research article kind of talking about how procrastination is actually emotional regulation, like the ability to sit, and frustration tolerance, the ability to sit with something that's very uncomfortable. So we want to build that frustration tolerance, so that ability to like sit there with a teacher that teaches totally different from this teacher and still be able to like tune in. So breaking it down and then making it, longer is probably going to be your best bet. And then also having him be aware, like, I'm frustrated right now. I don't know what this teacher's talking about and I'm frustrated. I don't like how they teach, but what is my plan to get through this? Okay.
Yep, thank you. Lisa Bloomfield asks, is it okay to expect older siblings to assist younger kids in their schoolwork? And if so, how much is too much?
Yeah, that's tricky because it's really like child dependent. It's really, I mean, some kids love to help and like they would probably do it all day and it would be more fun to them. And so it's fine. But I think when you start to see your child become frustrated or they're, crying, like, I don't have any time for myself. Ideally in this time, unless they really want to do it, I probably would not ask them to do it. I know different families have different situations where maybe it's like, I really need your help and to lean on you. But ideally I would really try to not have kids, older siblings help younger siblings unless they enjoy that activity. I don't know if that's such a clinical answer, but I just think in this time people are really frustrated and I don't know. It's always going to be the best.
For right now, that was our last question for the moment.
Okay. Can I just go, is it okay if I go back to the emotional regulation just for a little bit? Because I want, and I think especially you guys as educators know that we are definitely developing, frustration tolerance. We're developing executive functioning skills, right? So kids aren't going to be perfect. And when you have such a change, they're definitely not going to be perfect. So kind of, working with them. And that's kind of what I was talking about with the schedule and like maybe even a behavioral plan, because they are going to need help to be able to do this in an effective manner because their brain is literally still developing. And when we think about it, when we're in an emotional state, I don't want to call it a primitive kind of thing, but when we're in an emotional state, we're not using our frontal cortex. We're not, planning. Those things aren't happening. That part of the brain isn't lighting up, and we want to encourage them to start to do that or to, continue to do that. So perfection isn't the goal. Really, the goal is that as we keep doing this, they get better and better. But the first day and the second day, we're building on that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have anything else really to share. Oh, there was one thing I did want to share, that I am going to be available if you do need something, COVID specific, for children, moving forward. But as well, insurance companies, or most insurance companies, are actually not taking copays for teletherapy. So if if you're also looking for maybe a therapist outside of our community, most of the services for children will be free till June. So I thought that's good to know as well.
Palai, you sent a couple links to me to paste in here. And the first link that I'm going to paste in is from childmind.org.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to that for a second?
Yes. So yeah, let me. So all of the links that I sent were really kind of just gave like really good information on like how to talk to children of different ages. Child Mind was more for younger children, but still a really good resource. And I'll talk a little bit, I guess, in the next hour about how we're gonna, help some of our younger kids. The one that's really good, I think, is the CDC. Clearly they have the most recent information. The Child Mind Institute is also a really good one, just giving information on like healthy tips to use with your children during this time, healthy coping mechanisms. Even at the age of these children, sensory stuff is still really good because they're fidgety, right? Like they're not moving as much as they used to. And so a lot of like sensory items is actually really helpful for them. So there's also sensory items listed. Yeah, it's just helpful. And then like one has like a video of the day, and then each day they talk about like effective coping skills and like sleeping pattern, which is huge. That's huge. So I forgot to mention that. Please put your kids on the bedtime that they had and try to maintain that schedule as much as possible. Structure is our friend.
Okay. We have a question from the Harding family. What are some incentives besides TV and electronic devices that we can use to encourage our children to complete their daily work and tasks?
Yes. Okay. So I will give you a bunch. I will say, though, that those devices are very reinforcing, but we want to be careful with them. I won't bore you guys with brain studies, but we have to be very careful with electronics. And so if we are letting our child, we are incentivizing, or we are using electronics as an incentive, I would definitely say we need to time limit it just because of what we see happening neurologically with the brain. And there are things that it helps with, but it doesn't help with like impulse control and like executive functioning skills. Other skills, ice cream parties are great. You might probably give them dessert anyway. So it's good to tie things in that you were already going to do and say, oh, if you guys do really good, we can do ice cream sundaes tonight, right? That can be an incentive, and the whole family is kind of together. Game nights are good. Movie nights are really good. Maybe buying a movie that they really wanted to watch. Depending on how creative you want to get, and as a performer, kids love balloon fights because it's just fun. So like doing an activity day where like we can go outside, we can all like, have water balloon fights, maybe like a relay race. And then like you could even have like the winner get something, right? So it's like very bonding and family fun time together. Some kids just like, okay, I get this much time with mom by myself and mom and I cook a dinner, right? So we want to be really creative with how we do these things. Again, TV and electronics is it's one of the most it's one of the biggest things to incentivize kids, but I do warn parents that you have to time limit it. So I would even, if they're able, sorry, I know I'm going back and forth, but if they're able to like do all their homework and do everything they want, then there should be like a very controlled, so you get 15 minutes. Does that make sense? So it's very controlled, even if you are using that.
Right. And I would just add to that we are already asking children to be online more with their learning because of distance learning. And so the day can easily slip away where they're in front of a screen. So in that schedule that Pillai spoke about, having intentional times where they're getting up and moving and going outside, and they won't always want to do that by themselves. They will want to do it together, so I would have us think about that, just because I feel that the weight of asking kids to be online more, we have a combination of analog and digital, but there's just so much digital involved because of the nature of being apart and distanced. So that was something that I want to add. You will actually read in my letter next week. I'm almost going to plead, when you incentivize, if you're incentivizing with electronics outside of schooling, like contemplate it just being a weekend incentive, just because they're just getting, and it interrupts their sleep patterns when they get too much screen time, especially too late at night. My family keeps asking me, I'm leaning forward, if I have my glasses on because I'm looking at the screen so much. I have a pair of glasses, and I don't want your children to get to that point where they need that. So I just wanted to add that note. It really can be disruptive to sleep also. So.
And it is very disruptive to just executive functioning and impulse control in general, just because of how the reinforcement schedule of most of the games that they're playing. So.
Okay. We have another question, Pillai, from Tammy Morgan Motz's family. how much screen time is too much? Oh, that was an awesome segue.
That is
Awesome segue. Thanks, Tammy.
So I'm going to start by saying, research-wise, we're not completely sure. And I say that because different articles will tell you different things. And I haven't been able to find articles that I feel like, and I haven't been able to find articles that I feel like are very great as far as like empirically based research, right? So the truth is we don't know. There are very good articles that say that, you know, it is changing the way our brain processes things, and maybe not for the best, right? So yeah, I wish I would have a better answer. I'm hoping that the research does kind of, after, you know, this whole thing happens, give us some more concrete time. There are definitely things that say you shouldn't be on the screen more than 4 or 5 hours. There's things that say you shouldn't be on more than 8 hours. There's things that say if you have a screen protector that you can do it less, but we don't have enough research to say like this is the hard, like it's not like, I know at this age you need 7 hours of sleep. We're not there yet with the information. I don't know if anyone has found any articles that have shared, you know, but the statistics are just very small samples, and they're not.
Right, they're all over the place. We have the next question is from the Randolph family, and it has to do with this. It says, can you recommend a website that has recommendations about screen time? I know that Common Sense Media has recommendations, but do you know?
Yeah, no, I can't. I'm sorry. I can look. I don't want to send people like a bunch of research articles, because that's what I was, you know, reading through. But none of them were, I don't know, like none of them were for like great journals, or like great, like it's really not great robust. So you can't really generalize so much, or at least I haven't read any articles that I was like, oh yes, this is like generalizable to the population. But I can definitely look into that and kind of get back to the families, because it is important, but I just haven't found anything.
Okay, we have just a couple more minutes left. If you have any lingering questions, I would also submit to you that if you have younger kids and you want to attend the lower school virtual coffee, that would be, we encourage you to do that.
Yeah, the information will be a little bit different because it's more directed to that age.
Exactly, if you have younger kids. So I don't know if Val, if you want to paste the meeting ID in the chat box, in the chat window, if you have younger kids that you're interested in learning more about. Any other questions? Paul, I mentioned that that the school is going to be making her available for some things. How will that information, Lisa Bloomfield, how will that information come to our families?
So if you would like, you know, if you would like to have maybe sessions for your kids focused on, you know, COVID-19, or you would like some help with kind of creating a schedule, email Lisa Bloomfield, and then she'll get back to you on kind of, you know, a schedule and seeing when we can set up an appointment.
Okay, I'm just putting in the chat box. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so we got some questions. All right, got another question from the Fuentes Fox family. Oh, you have a question for me. I want to know if the kids can anticipate more interactive classes with live with students as a group as they would as if they were in the classroom. Let me ask a clarifying question, Vicki. Do you mean student to student meetings or student to teacher meetings? Student to teacher. So that's one of the reasons, one of the things that we're looking at. We have to look across the school at all the time that's going on. I would say yes, we're having conversations about it. I would say that we have to look at a lot of information. So one of the things about distance learning is that the students, Paul, I talked about self-regulation or self-regulation emotionally and with frustration. we also have self-regulation with regard to what we're doing with our work and how we spend our time. So we are looking to find a good balance between asynchronous, where they work offline, and when they're working with teachers. So yes, we're looking at it. Sometimes kids just want to meet because they want the social interaction. So that's a consideration for us. Sometimes they want to meet because they'd rather have the teacher tell them rather than have to dig in. And we're trying to find the balance between all those things. Palai, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to cut in because I just read the question. So there's two concepts mixed, so I just want to explain. So what I was saying is, if you need any services through St. Anne's, I will be here, and then you can email Lisa Bloomfield about setting up a session. If you wanted to go outside of the school, most insurance companies are providing or giving telehealth therapy without a copay. So you would have to go to your insurance company. This is separate from us. You would have to go to your insurance company and see if they're not asking for a copay, and you could go to them, or you could email Lisa Bloomfield, and then we could do it through the school, which would also be a free service. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. So, so to finish about your question, Vicki, about student to teacher. So we are looking at that. There's a lot of other demands too that we have to look at. People's schedules, kids' schedules. So a teacher can say, we're going to have a class and only half of the kids could show up. That's why we record some of those classes. That's why teachers are using a combination of video and digital and other digital tools, as well as non-digital tools for kids to work on. So yes, we are looking at it. I don't know about what amount that will be. I also have to look that middle schoolers need the interaction, the personal interaction, but our lower schoolers also do too. So we have to look across the whole school. So the answer is yes, we're looking at it. And that's probably not the answer you want, but that I can't give you a definitive answer because we still have to look at it. We did collect information from all the teachers across the entire school about all the weekly meetings that they're having with students, and what that looks like. That just finished up at the end yesterday. And so Ms. White, Valerie and I are looking at that, and along with Barry. So, okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been wonderful. Thank you for joining us. If you have other questions, you can email those to Lisa Bloomfield. And so that's always an open line of communication, and she coordinates with Palai for the school. We thank you for being here this morning. Before we came on, on my slide, I had that we have a new Instagram name for the school, and I'm going to put it in the chat box, and I'm going to have to remember what it is because I cut and pasted before. Valerie, do you remember what it is? St. Anne's Herons? You're muted, Val.
St. Anne's Herons.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Renee, for putting it in there. I just wanted to bring your attention to that. If you were not an Instagram user before, I would recommend. It's an easy app to download. You get to see a lot of good things, and it's another good way to connect. Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here this morning. If you know friends who couldn't be here today, tell them it's recording and it'll be available on our COVID website for the school, the COVID page, and it has lots of other resources for learning and for parents in general. All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.